So, welcome back. Here we are again, folks. Can you talk, says Alan Voss. Can you talk about color schemes next? This is on the heels of something on color we did recently, I think. Please and thank you. The color scheme idea is very much a compositional question, isn't it? And it's a subject that I think Alan might be looking for. Well, the secret to what's the secret to color schemes? But that isn't me. If you're asking that question, you want to ask somebody else. I don't keep secrets. That's not a secret to me. It's a matter of long looking. And one of the things that nature does is it provides us with beautiful colors. And over time, you realize that when you put your colors into a rectangle, you have a color combination that's beautiful, and then you find somebody else has done one that's even more beautiful than yours, and we start getting to this place where we realize there's such a thing as a color scheme. That the persons who take the most time to think it through, in general and in their particular pictures at a given time, are going to be the guys who excel at it. We like to point at Degas. We'll end with a bunch of stuff from Degas. But in the meantime, why don't we just start out talking about simple ideas about color schemes. The upper left one, if I don't have it wrong, is Fra Angelico, and Raphael to the right. Raphael represents sort of, to me, the sort of standard, both of them do this, standard red, yellow, blue combination mentality, right? And and it's, and if you have any taste at all, you can tell which is the good red to go with the blues and all that sort of thing. The body there, by the way, represents, theoretically at least, the yellow, and I think that characteristically is the way his work does work. But I want to say something before I even start this, and that is that the colors of those images I'm giving you could be wildly off the mark. So I'm going to just allow that if these images were coming to us just like on the walls of a museum, which for about 5 reasons they aren't. I'm going to show you a little later how confusing that does get. The Some of these things are beautiful to look at anyway. And I'm looking at the Fra Angelico there, and just the way it presents, you can say the grand mass of this picture is yellow, that there's a red, the pink, and that there's a blue, this what I'm calling a green gray, which seems to pick up again out here in a light variation on it. And so that's fairly typical to have a triad. For some reason, when you do just two, it feels more like simply decorative art, and I think it loses a bit of the sense of life, a sense of truth, of what you might call that slice that you're trying to create out of your imagination. These pictures being those kinds of paintings, so meaning imaginative, and so let's go. Let's go on. These are both nice. This is nice color choices. One of the reasons these guys maintain their standing is because of, among other things, their colors work well. I mean, they have eyes. Their orientation is toward beauty, toward the aesthetic, sort of what looks good. And yet there are many roads to color, and some people, spectacularly, you might say, focus on color and really bring the color, and others are much. And in this phase here, we are very concerned. We in the West are very concerned about telling the story, the Bible story, or the whatever story it is related to commissioner, the commissioner of the picture, and that was fairly typical. These are illustrations of stories. What I mean to say is, isn't it nice for all you guys who are sort of criticized for being illustrators are actually right at the forefront of our of our very game. Um, so, and by the way, I say that to help people understand. I'm not one of those guys who wants to lay um, illustrators out. But I do have expectations, and I think some of those get abused. That I say that some of the expectations aren't fair, given that lots of times in the world of illustration, you're not given enough time to really, unless you're just a genius, to really work these things out. Some of the problems that happen to some of the things that, let's not call them problems, but so the ability to work something up in a particular way according to your preferences, even to think through the color really well, That may be injured by that, by the pressures of the dates that they want that thing done by. So let's not make more of that. You all know those sorts of things. Let's just talk about color. And when you talk about color, you can't, in the West at least, not be talking about Veronese. He's considered to be, and Gamel reinforces it in his own thinking, the great colorist of the West. So understand that when we say colorist, we mean somebody who actually knows how to employs color really, really well. Doesn't mean doesn't get a bad color scheme, but actually makes you delight in the color. Where the color really is beautiful in its relationships and in the totality of the general impression the painting leaves with you. The upper left one was from the Frick Gallery. I saw it quite a bit when I was a student in New York. I recommend you look at it. They have that, and they have another picture of the same ilk of, what is it? At the Met anyway, and same approximate size. And those were two that I kept looking at, thinking when I was trying to figure out composition, and they kept spitting my ideas out. I should add that. So here's Veronese considered that, and you can see in this just in this lower work here, there's a wonderful unity of the picture and colors that go well together. And I'm going to feature that. I'm going to help you feast on that in the next one, which is the Feast of Cana. I'm going to ask my Mr. Conductor, Mr. Producer. Hey, you just went to a different place, Mr. Producer. But to just let this cover the whole screen, and let's look at Veronese just for a second. This is one of those pictures, again, where you can't, it looks to me like it's got to be false in a number of ways. Among others, one of those being just simply the fact that when the lights come through these things, some of these colors look almost day glow, and I don't know that any of them do actually in the real work. But what you can see in this work, though, is you can see just one thing immediately, and that is, and I'll get away and show you some things. You can see color schemes. You can see, remember Degas saying, there's nothing more beautiful than two values of the same color side by side. And here you have that in the shoulder. I'm going to get my laser operating for me here. Here you have that in the shoulder of this green guy up here. But if you just sit here and look at these combinations here, you understand what I'm talking about in terms of color, interrelationships of color, but color combinations. But here you can see this really fantastic thing here. Then you can come over to this one. Look at this. Amazing colors together. Now, one of the things was such an opportunity, it makes you wonder if Veronese actually painted this painting because he wanted to be able to paint color combinations. And so it feels like everybody came to that feast dressed to the T's. But what they did is they came dressed in color combinations that were aesthetic. So now you tell me that's Veronese, or you just tell me it's you when you come. I'm saying if you, for example, were to wear colored clothes, brightly colored clothes like this, a lot of guys just wear dark suits and the right kind of tie, but the wives will come, and still do, dressed with colors that go beautifully together. So here you can see that a type of blue and red. Here you can see this orange to blue. Just look how beautifully the colors set each other off. Here's a different one right over here. Do you see in the middle of this picture? So I'm giving you close-ups. That's all this is. Even the neutrals here and the way they integrate with the other colors, including the arms. Beautiful color combinations. Even the center part here, you can see that he spent time associating this area, the parts like this. If that's skin back there, I think it is, yeah. The skin color going so beautifully with that blue and so on. You know what I'm saying? And can you see it, I should say. So here's a blue. Look at that beautiful blue and yellow combination. Here's the yellow to green combination with all the decorative stuff happening in it. What's not to die for? Now, anybody who's talking color schemes has to understand this. You have to understand colors doing beautiful things together. Remember, the idea of a scheme is together. It's the idea of what it does together. And if you can get to first base, so I send students around when you're doing a still life, as the guys working my intensive right now know, and I ask you to find colors that go together, find objects with colors that actually belong in the same picture before you do anything else. Yeah, get a variety of everything else, get shapes you want, get whatever, but pick things up, just pick up things that go together in the same picture and keep jumping around these sections of these pictures that just go wildly beautiful in color combinations. The only thing that's somewhat like this, it probably is all over the place. By the way, one of those things I don't pretend to do is know the world. I mean to say I know the world through books and all these other ways, but I haven't seen every beautiful picture in the world, and I haven't seen this picture in person. But the reproductions here, and again, I'm saying treat this as if it were the painting and it looked just this way, and then I could extol the virtues of it if this were it. And I suggest to you that they wouldn't be this beautiful by accident, except I'll show you what the accidents can look like. So that's the marriage at Cana. Notice that in that picture, though, the whole thing has a really wonderful feast of color feeling to it, right? The whole thing is set off, or I should say, is the foil for it is a fairly neutral ground overall. There's sort of a grayish thing. It's a very pleasing kind of gray, with variations of its own, the redder grays and things like that. And you can see the grays intermittently sort of showing up through the picture, and in all sorts of different ways, in combination values, all sorts of things. And the color is somehow created to create that sense of being rich in its combinations and rich in its totality. So the thing to notice here, though, is that now when I just look at this, one of the things in color schemes, one of the things you do when you're making a color scheme, but this isn't the color scheme moment, so I have to just say this briefly and get out. But that is the distribution of colors. So when you have a blue, your eye will pick up the rest of the blues, maybe that one, maybe this one. Certainly the top ones of a certain type of color, they'll be placed, if a painter was involved, they'll be placed well. They'll be placed well in relation. The painter's always aware of how they relate to each other in their placement, their size, their intensity. And so you can see that with all the reds, the Christ figure here with the blue and red, but you'll see that red and you'll immediately see it as part of this one and so on. The degree to which these things are true, with apologies again, I say I don't have this picture in front of me. I'm using this as if it were his, because it allows us to talk about the ideas at least. So that's Veronese. Now Tiepolo's later, Michelangelo's before Veronese. I think by a lot of years. I'm trying to think, was that 100 years? No, it wasn't 100, but yeah. Boy, it wasn't close. But here's Michelangelo doing the Sistine ceiling, and I've seen so many versions of this thing, I don't know which one to believe anymore. But you can tell in almost any of them that he's very aware of the beauty of the color relations, right? So here's a guy who says he's not a painter, but this is fundamental stuff, right? Get great colors together. Here again is that beautiful neutral that looks good with any of these colors. It has a sort of a greenish, if you want to say, quality, and it has, but it has a magnificent gold that sort of dominates, and then these really, really supportive greens in various values. If you can look at this stuff here, is that same sort of thing. This picture isn't much different from this one. It's just a totally different values range, except that this guy builds up the reds, uses an orange to red scheme. Where the orange to yellow might be more true to it, what we're talking about. Or the orange to green is the big thing. But still, you can see the orange and the green that you see in the Michelangelo and the skin tone. And then you see this other set of colors, which is that there's a blue to gray and a red. So color schemes are interesting in that they go in, you can get a certain blue and say a certain green and gold, and you can go in other directions for your third color. And so there's two roads dividing in a yellow wood, shall we say. And so you're not obligated to, you don't simply, you go the way that the stuff you have provides, allows for you, sets up for you, and you go the way of the inclination of your heart. And I mean to say what you love, what really is beautiful to look at. And so in this case here, by the way, you see the neutrals there's a whole mass of neutrals. It's pretty typical of Western art that there's an attempt to feature some color, have some other colors that are nice, and have a grand mass of relatively neutral stuff. All that relative neutral stuff, it does become relative later on, especially when you get to a guy like Degas, where the whole painting might feel like it's all up a level. But this is just where you can actually see the various. I wish I'd separated these more. I didn't. Overlapping them isn't the greatest thing. But you can clearly see in this one here, again, the gold to green combination. And you can see the gold into the richer orange, right, into the more orange side. So, and one of those things, by the way, is when I say there's a triad of colors, you're not obligated to make it 3. It could be 4 or more. But in this case, you can feel that you see the blues up here. As these colors get more orange, that combination, you begin again to remind you that you begin to see that perhaps what Veronese was up to, excuse me, people, And then down here you see more of the green to the yellow, right? So that idea of a movement, but you can have green and blue, and you can have orange and yellow. And by the way, all the variations in this orange, that, for example, the pink here would be a variation, presumably, of that. It doesn't look like it's trying to be a purple. Those are just interesting thoughts. But when you're talking about a color scheme, one of the things that Degas found himself doing was starting with one dominant color and getting a beautiful color to look good with it. And I would say that meaning he never told me that, but there's a sense because of the way he starts pictures frequently, none of which I'm showing here, sets up a strong first color, and then you see other colors immediately setting off against them. For example, coloring the entire painting a green or something, and then putting other like orange colors on top of that and moving from there. It's a featuring mentality. But anyway, you can see this picture here is dominated by green to gold. This one here is gold to green maybe, but it's more of a beige total package. And this one here it's still green and red. It's the greens, but the yellow into the green. Well, it's over here. This is a whole cooler mass. Now, what was I going to say about that? Oh, so notice when you're looking at pictures that this is shall we say, this is a green picture featuring gold. This is a red picture, and I could say featuring the green in a curious way. But and you could say the same thing about all pictures you look at. So there's a general difference. This picture has an overall sort of a more mustardy kind of a color. Now that overall thing is characteristic. That's one of those you have to notice about your color scheme. But it's not a color scheme per se. I'm just saying that all pictures take on a particular color. You can see the difference here. This picture is more dominated by the reds. This one is far more dominated by the greens as the major mass of the painting. And yet this one here still features a red picture featuring reds. I'm saying everything dominant reds, even the clouds have them. Again, don't trust this to be true to the real thing. Don't send me messages that these aren't true. I get that. But given what they are, and as beautiful as they are, they're deriving from something that's pretty beautiful. But, and again, so what you see with the picture that goes off in this cooler direction down here, you see the greens, the deader greens feature, let the rich greens feature, but they also show off the oranges. And of course, in all color schemes, you're wanting those things to feel good together. So your basic thing, and that's one of those difficult things in painting where people are saying, and I say to you, that it seems to me that the problem of the representational world, especially when you're telling a story, is to get them to be adequate. Degas seems to be one of the first guys who really, in our time, and I think it's because the world was really being more clearly thought through, and thanks to Monet's sort of investigations, opened up some doors to possibilities in the range of range of intensities and color combinations and all that sort of stuff. All sorts of things were opened up for Degas. What was I going to say about that? Oh, yeah, and so he became quite experimental. Now, one of the things we talked about, let's see if I can show you those now. One of the things we talked about was recently in our class. Let me go past these. You understand these are three of the same subjects. You see wildly different schemes, right? And again, you'll see the coolest one, then the warmest one, and then this one somewhere in between. You can see the domination of different tones. This is more in the sense of a purpley painting. This is far more in the direction of a what shall we say? I don't know, but definitely a richer than the other two. And that's the total package. And yet in each one of these, you can see that the colors are going well together. But I'm going to go past that. I'm going to go to these guys. So Jerome was probably born the same year or so. He was probably born a few years, 5 years or so before Degas. And this time I'm actually putting pictures out here for you. I mean, names out here. And Leighton was born in a similar time. Moore was considerably later. But when you do an imaginative painting, you've got to figure the same thing out that you do in that Degas is doing. Except what happened with Degas, he began to consider that it's possible that he was really going to the fundamental thing, and realism in its was cramping his style. And I don't mean realism in the he's trying to be wrong or sloppy sense, but he's actually allowing color to really dominate him. But I'm showing you these because these are beautiful color combinations by the what do you call them? The academics, Leighton in England, and Albert Moore in England later. And this guy is, again, 5 years younger than or more younger than Degas, so he might very well have seen some of Degas' experiments. But this guy will take a picture like this, and he'll make an orange version of it, or a green version of it, and a yellow version of it. So, in one sense, I think of him as you might think of tonalists. I think of as a rose-colored glasses guy, where he just simply moves everything completely over to yellow, and then all the blues and everything in it are saturated with yellow. Don't trust the colors in this one. This is really beautiful choice of colors. That again, that classic great neutral background, and then the choice of colors, the interplay of the reds. The color scheme seems to be taken from this, which was Richelieu's, appears to have been Richelieu's coat of arms, and so you can see that the reds and the blues are very derivative of that sort of thing. And then the wall becomes a version, shall we say, of the yellows, the feature of which is, of course, right there. And the reds, by the way, everything you're thinking about is how to feature these things is very significant. So it's important where the strong one is. That is to say, it's important what the set is doing of the reds. Set of the blues. Notice them. If a painter was there, it's a good-looking group. Okay. I don't know what else I can say. You see the difference between these two. This is a much more neutral painting featuring the colors. This is a much more rich painting. But it's still, you still say, well, it's a warmer picture, and it's in a sense more rich in color. Yeah, these are still trying to be what we'd call neutrals out here. Again, this one doesn't look as plausibly like as this one does, what I've seen. But you can say again, you see the mentality of featuring. So in a red picture, the red can be a feature, and then the sort of the blues and the yellows. But it's a question of what do you want. Here it is, one of those things when we're talking about setting up a color scheme that we try to get. My version of it is to try to get as much of your best colors into a dominant place. Doesn't mean they all have to be there, but you don't really want to have funny surprises somewhere that make you think something else is starting to take over from the center of interest or becoming a distraction. This is Blatchfield, an American painter. I'm just showing it because he was about the time, I think he was at the same time as Albert Moore, but he really brings a rich color scheme here to this picture. He's ultimately a mural painter, and I'm not showing any mural paintings, but mural painting is a natural, right? That's where you expect the color to be decorative, where you expect the colors to really sing in relation to each other. So when you're talking about a color scheme, there's two things you should always be aware of, Alan, and one of them is the idea of the would you wear that, as I've mentioned before, and the other one is would it decorate the wall beautifully, whether do all the colors go together. And there's an expectation that they do. In other words, there's an aesthetic expectation. If in our art form, there's an expectation that the colors will do beautiful things together. And that's one of the reasons why there's a grand featured color. If it's featured, it means that it's been well set off by the other colors around it, and that it has ultimately other players of its kind spread out through the picture, making a nice woven quality, right? So there's a weaving activity that goes on. Yeah. Here's a couple more Americans. I would like to say when I look at these Americans, I'm just showing it because I know these guys and they're more near our time. But this Matthews was also a decorative. He was part of the sort of the arts and crafts thing, or some people want to think of him as a tonalist. That's absolutely fair. So is John White Alexander in that class. But these are both really, really, really nice color schemes. Really excellent to look at as color. So when you're making up a color scheme, you want the colors to belong together, but you also want the large package to look really like this is a color delight. You'd buy, particularly the left one, you'd buy that for the color. Much like the Michelangelo, you'd buy that for the color. And that's what you expect of a good color scheme. You want me to tell you how to get there? Here's the Whistler I was telling you about. Is something goes on, and I'm sure this is exactly the same picture, but this is the weirdness of the internet. What in the heck happened? Did somebody purposely do something like this to change the colors? This is more likely what the real thing looks like, but who knows? Maybe it's halfway between the two. But it doesn't look like two different pictures, does it to you? I don't know that he did these exact paintings in two different color schemes. That doesn't mean that a person like Degas might not have come very close to doing that. But this just shows you how you can't rely on the internet. And yet you can see that in this blue world, this yellow this isn't bad. It's still pretty interesting looking. And in this more neutralized, semi purplish, red to pink, gray background. This is a beautifully featured peachy color down the middle. Udamaro was 100 years before these guys, before the Boston School guys. He was somewhere around the what am I to say, the mid 1800s. No, he was the mid 1700s, mid to late 1700s. But look at what he's doing. And again, this one I've seen in 3 or 4 different versions. But it gives you a clear idea. Again, I'm bringing this back because that orange and that green. And again, you're seeing the idea of red, yellow, and blue. You're seeing an idea of a triad, even with these guys way back then. But this guy's color is really, really remarkable. Beautiful stuff. Lots of it relatively neutral. These things are effectively watercolors. They're prints. They're very, you can't build up these kinds of colors in the same way. I assume you can combine colors together. I've never done prints like this. But what you want to do whenever you're doing your color setup is just look at the colors and ask yourself, is that all of a piece? That's a question, right? All of a piece, another word for scheme, a plan of unity, right? So you can see that this picture here is in one direction. This picture is a very different direction. Thanks to the domination of this yellow, this kind of yellow, the lemon yellow sort of to green thing into other reds. But again, you can see the combination of this costume here, the stuff that person is wearing, just like in the Veronese, is different from this. And yet you'll see some of these colors effectively picking up in other places and vice versa. So, yeah. And so more Udamaro. And for all my Japanese friends out there, what was happening is that everybody was seeing this stuff at some point. Everybody, I mean, it was already being seen by people like, I don't know about, I would have to hesitate to say, yeah, it wasn't being seen by, of course it wasn't. A lot of Oriental stuff was being seen in Holland way back in the 16s, but this stuff would have been later, and you get the sense clearly that Degas is being influenced by what these guys are doing. Yeah, and but I don't know what else to say about them. Just have yourself be aware of what you're doing with color and how beautifully things set each other off. Again, he's got himself in the same place where he can make a beautiful color combination for this group and have pieces of it pick up around this group, which is itself a whole different, now a green to sort of a semi-gold, dead gold kind of a combination. Where it's also then picking up in odd ways and places around the picture. So there's that weaving all the colors again. And those areas where colors which are different from others are featured up, well, the red on red, for example. So when you're thinking color schemes, you're thinking, the simplest way to think of it is, would you wear that combination? So with the dress, the scarf, the shoes, the hat, in the old days of the Victorian era, and the costume jewelry or whatever. Sorry, Mr. Producer. This suddenly became jewelry. And just think that way. You will have a color scheme if it all goes together. Now, if you want to ask me some specific questions about how to tune it, well, that's just going to take your experience, right? But one of the things you can do looking at these pictures, you can block out any single color and ask yourself what happens to the color scheme when you take that away. Doesn't mean anything except that that's well organized. You take one out or you try to replace it with something else. Doesn't mean it can't be done. But you'll see that it puts a lot of pressure on other things, so the picture won't have as much of some, of its magic. When you start doing, you can take it out of a certain place. And that's a good way to look at composition generally, by the way. Imagine some part of it being removed and just look at that. because then you take in the whole, and when you take in the whole, you get a much better idea. Just like in your costume, when you're looking at it, you're looking at the woman's hair. Let's just do it that way. The Victorian woman's hair, her everything she's wearing simultaneously, and then finally the coat comes on before it goes out on this winter night in New England, and that's going to also, in some way, beautifully relate. So yeah, I'm not sure I have more than that. Let's see if there's a. Oh yeah, I forgot. One of the, to me, Gemmell once said about Hunter, and I think I mentioned this recently, but that is that he believes that maybe Hunter is going to be more remembered than the rest of the Boston, the people he knew, than anybody else in our time. And I think he meant himself as well. But Hunter has a phenomenally interesting sense of color, and I mean a sense of unity of color. And it has that wonderful thing of being like, how does that work sometimes, right? But the fact is, on the face of it, usually you can blink at it and it does. And if you don't think so, you should look at it with all the other landscape painters that come out of the Gemmell, maybe Lack or me or other people. Look at out of the whole background of Gemmell and ask yourself if, put them side by side with these guys over and over. This guy just wins every time. And it's that color thing. I mean, you could say that everybody understands the idea of organizing objects, although he just does that one-eye thing, and he does it more, every time he does it, he does something just a little more curious than the previous time. Yet it's all based on one thing. And that, by the way, some of what he said to me was he's just trying to get a picture out every week or every 2 weeks or something. And so things have to be turned into some sort of a machine, and yet the aesthetician never leaves. He's the man of taste. And so it's very, very, very beautifully colored. These are really beautiful color combinations. Probably as nice as anything you'll ever see in still life. I mean, the history of still life. And there's some nice things out there, but this guy truly gets color. This is Robert Douglas Hunter. And is a wonderful example to everybody trying to do it. But let me pause here for just a second and say it's not so much a question of tricks. It's a question of taste. It's a question of judgment. It's a question of a sense of beauty, which has to be developed and evolved over time, which is why you look at nature a lot, but look at nature with the idea of seeing where, especially in the color world, especially where interesting things are happening, and notice the field, notice the relationships of all the parts. And you'll get ideas there. And the second part is look at paintings. And I like the way Ang says it, look at art with the idea of understanding nature better. But art is the resource for us. I mean, it's interesting when a guy like Stebbins says that art is nature. He actually says art is nature. Except he says art is nature seen through a prism of a personality, and through the prism of a personality. So the first part of that, if you're a still life painter or if you're a portrait painter, the first part of that is, did you set up the portrait, say, with good color relations? I like those of Reynolds frequently, and others, but people sort of get plausible. I mean, one of the things you can do is get lazy, thinking it's all going to be about how much you can perform the likeness of the face. But the painting is lost already if you haven't got a great color scheme. So when you have the person come in, you look at the person and try to find out what sets their face off beautifully. And when you're thinking background or when you're thinking the clothes on them, because everything is about the face, isn't it? About singing with you can't get rid of the face and its colors. So you're trying to actually make it a nice feature of the picture. Some of Degas are funny because you'll get very dead faces because he so doesn't care. It so isn't about featuring this ballerina. So he just uses the head as dead whites, as if the person was powdered up with talcum or something. But if I can get you to just get to know the most beautiful paintings, and I was saying the same thing with it, you can go online and just get a beautiful painting and make yourself a packet, a folder of beautiful paintings. I mean, paintings are beautiful in color. And then keep looking for that. You'll start on your own. You'll suddenly say, oh, I'm looking at pictures, and then all of a sudden you'll see something you think is really beautiful again. Grab that beautiful one in color and stuff it in your folder, and then one day go through it and see which ones you thought were good aren't so good comparatively. And what happens is the elevation of your taste, or things you've never even thought about before. When you first do it, you'll probably pick pictures that are pretty modest, and then you'll sort of wake up. Now, some of that waking up, you'll think, well, it's because the pictures get richer and all things like that. But you'll eventually get sophisticated enough to know that a picture as neutral as the one here at the bottom can be the most beautiful of the color type pictures that you show up. Again, take in the whole field and don't be looking at this color and that color, and then also look at this color and that color and the relationships, that you see in that little world here that again reminds you of Veronese. Is that, I think that's what I have, and I'm going to go backwards just a minute just to go back to Degas a second. By the way, one of the things about Whistler, he would sometimes refer to these as studies in various colors and that sort of thing. So what would he call them? Studies in red and blue or something like that. And I name some of mine that way because I've done the same thing with some of these pictures, which I'm not showing here. But when you're a colorist, that's one of those things that you're really focused on, really bringing the color. I just want to get back to Degas because I sort of ran past some parts of him. What you'll find is all kinds of these experiments in color. But if you can just get yourself to a place where you can see beautiful this to this, one color to another, just the way this gold is featuring by the greenness is, or you can see right here the entire scheme, so to speak, of the green on gold. And then proceed from there to find the relationships within that. You'll at least have a starting place. So if you want me to give you some sort of plan, you say to yourself, I'm going to wear this coat. When I send students around to find a still life, a group of things that go together in color, I say, what's the one thing you're going to use? You say, I think I want to paint this. And go around and start collecting various values and colors that are in sync with that, and I should say that are in the same family, and then go find the other colors that are in sync with it by the right blue for it if it's a red, the right yellow for it if it's a red, and the right yellow and blue and red for each other, just as a beginning point of all this stuff. One of the things you're going to see about color, by the way, is that some pictures they take on qualities like being a warm picture versus a cool one, and those kinds of internal harmonies are very much part of a color scheme when you get all done. So it isn't like you have to collect to that. You just collect colors that go together, and pretty soon you'll sort of see which way the wind is blowing. And that's one of those things where I try to get people always to listen to their stuff, really listen and see what it's up to in color. One thing that happens when people are going out there trying to figure out how to do color is they take an object, and then the first thing they find, they say, that looks pretty nice. So I'd say it's a red thing, and they take a blue, or it's one of these yellow things, and they take a green, and they don't find the right green because they don't go through this green to this green to this green to this green. I'll tell you, that's one of the most critical things. Trial and error is massively good for you to teach yourself to see beauty in color, to see really beautiful color relations. So you can have a gold all day long, but you won't really understand it until you've tried all these blues, and you suddenly find this one. And all of a sudden, because that happened, you begin to understand that yellow a little bit. And you do the same thing with, say, red. If you do that in a simple way, you're going to be waking up your taste. But the trial and error, try things, and do, we give you what you may as well call multiple choice, or this versus that, and this versus that over and over again. And you will evolve a taste. You will evolve great taste. And I suggest to you what you'll do also is you'll evolve your own color theory, which is going to be in the long run one of those things that carries you. In other words, the body of knowledge you get from doing that is going to always be there for you. So I don't think I've answered your question even slightly directly enough, probably, Alan. But I don't have a secret to doing this except that if you know where you're starting, like in the skin of this beautiful woman, then your first job is to set her off in every kind of way. And before you know it, this to this to this to this is a color scheme. You see what I mean? And then the question is, when you do your design, can you stay with it, right? Just stay with it. Don't go wandering off doing happy little things from outer space, okay? All right. Well, let's leave it at that. Nice to end on Michelangelo and seeing him as somehow a colorist. Isn't that amazing? I'd love to see that thing in person. I still haven't. So, all right. Well, best wishes to you all in your efforts, and to you, Alan, in particular. And I'm looking forward to the next discussion on color. It's fun focusing on the idea of schemes. All right. Take care. See you in the next one. Yeah, and I forgot to say, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for subscribing, sharing, liking, commenting. Thank you. And donating. There's a donation button showing there. Just hit it and go for it. Much help to keep these things, to keep them flowing. Again, I am going to be doing this is still going to go on for just once a week for at least the next 2 or 3 weeks. So don't be surprised. And I apologize for not having gotten any blogs out to anybody by Instagram or whatever we do it with. I did mean to do that. And so another time. All right. Yeah. Have a great week.